Birthdays used to feel like something, a little sacred pause in the year, a gentle reminder that I mattered at least to someone. But this morning, I woke up to silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, but sinks into your bones and makes itself at home. No alarm bells of excitement, no whispered happy birthday beside me, no breakfast smell drifting from the kitchen. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the tapping of rain against the bedroom window. I laid there for a moment, wrapped in my robe like a shield, staring at the ceiling. I told myself it was early. Maybe he was planning something, maybe. The surprise needed quiet. But when I rolled over and saw his side of the bed already cold, I knew better. His briefcase had been gone before I even woke up. My phone was quiet too. No texts, no missed calls, not even a notification from him. I checked again anyway, refreshing like maybe the universe had just gotten delayed. Still nothing. I got out of bed, dragging my slippers across the wooden floor like a ghost haunting her own house. In the kitchen, the coffee pot was empty. Not a post-it note, not a crumb from a rushed goodbye. He'd just gone, like it was any other day. I poured myself cereal but left it untouched on the table. The spoons clinked a little too loud in the stillness, and even the milk felt too cold, like it knew. Outside, the clouds had settled low and heavy, cloaking everything in gray. It should have made the room feel cozy, but instead it felt like a reflection of something inside me, dull, heavy and unspoken. I wandered around the house aimlessly. The decorations from last year were still in the closet. I knew exactly where. I'd bought them myself back then too, hoping to make it easy for him. But this year, I didn't bother. There was nothing lonelier than decorating your own party. No one else is coming to. By noon, I found myself curled up on the living room couch, knees tucked under an old blanket, mindlessly scrolling through social media. Photo after photo of cakes, surprises, friends singing loudly in dimly lit rooms, some smiling in restaurants, others in kitchens surrounded by candles and laughter. A few years ago, that had been me. We used to have dinners, he used to remember. There was even a time he brought flowers before he even said happy birthday. I held onto that memory like a fraying ribbon. Now I couldn't remember the last time he looked at me the way he did back then. I tried to push the guilt away, the kind that whispers you're being ungrateful, that at least you're not alone in life. But I was. Not physically, maybe, but the kind of alone that lingers even when someone is in the same room. The kind of alone where you share a house, a bed, a name, but feel invisible. I thought maybe he'd call around lunch. Maybe he was caught up at work. Maybe he left in a rush. I replayed conversations from the week, looking for clues, but there were none. It wasn't anger or a fight. It was worse, he just forgot. Or maybe he didn't care. 3 o'clock came. I still hadn't moved much. I lit a candle, just for the smell of something warm, vanilla and sandalwood. It flickered softly on the coffee table, but it didn't help the hollow echo in the room. I looked at the door more than once, hoping it would open. I thought of texting someone, my sister, an old friend, anyone. But I didn't want to explain. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted to be remembered without asking for it. The sky was darker now, though the day had barely ended. I wrapped the blanket tighter and told myself maybe this year would just pass quietly. Not all birthdays have to be celebrated. Some can be just another day, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It wasn't about cake or balloons or dinner reservations. It was about being seen, being thought of, being loved enough for someone to say, "I'm glad you were born." And today, no one had said that. Not even him. The knock on the door came, just as the rain shifted from a soft patter to a steady rhythm. It was subtle, almost hesitant, 3 light taps, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't entirely sure they should be there. I sat up slowly, blanket sliding off my shoulders, heart skipping for just a moment. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a split second, foolish hope flickered. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he sent someone, or came home early. I opened the door to find Daniel, The boy next door, though boy, didn't quite fit anymore. He was 22 now, tall, lean in the way youth often is, with shaggy dark hair damp from the rain and that look of gentle awkwardness that made him seem younger than he was. I remembered him as the kid who used to kick soccer balls into our backyard, who used to wave at me with both arms like I was someone important. Lately, we'd exchanged a few more grown-up pleasantries, mail misdelivered, driveway snow shoveling offers, but not much beyond that. He stood there holding something behind his back, eyes wide like he'd been caught sneaking out after curfew. "Hi," he said, almost like a question. "Sorry, I hope I'm not bothering you." I blinked, still halfway between sadness and confusion. "No, it's fine. What's going on?" He pulled a small white box from behind his back, the kind you get from a local bakery. A simple red ribbon wrapped around it, slightly damp now. He smiled, shy. "My mom mentioned it was your birthday. I got this on my way home. Thought maybe you'd like something sweet." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. I'd gone the whole day without hearing those words once, and now they came from a neighbor's son with water droplets still clinging to his eyelashes. "You didn't have to do that," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He shrugged one shoulder, like it wasn't a big deal. "Yeah, I know. Just figured. Birthdays should have cake, right?" I stepped aside. "Come in before you drown." He hesitated for a beat, then crossed the threshold, careful to wipe his sneakers on the mat. He smelled faintly of rain and something warm, maybe cinnamon from the bakery, or maybe just youth. Inside, the house felt smaller with someone else in it, but not in a bad way. The silence I'd been swimming in all day shifted, no longer echoing. I set the box down on the kitchen island and untied the ribbon slowly. Inside, a single cupcake, chocolate, with pale pink frosting and a small edible happy birthday. Topper slightly tilted to one side. I smiled. I couldn't help it. "This is actually really sweet." He leaned on the counter, hands in the pocket of his hoodie. "I didn't know what kind you liked. I figured chocolate was safe. It's perfect." We stood there in the kitchen, the overhead lights humming gently, and I suddenly realized how long it had been since anyone brought something just for me. No occasion beyond kindness. He didn't bring flowers or gifts wrapped in guilt or empty gestures. Just a cupcake, a simple thing, but it cracked something open in my chest. "You want coffee?" I asked, already reaching for the mugs. "Sure," he said. "If you're having one too." I brewed the coffee while he sat at the table, tapping his fingers lightly against the wood. We talked a little about the rain, about how quiet the neighborhood had been lately, about his classes and how he hated online lectures. Normal things, but his presence did something strange. It grounded me. It filled the room with a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in so long. There was no pressure, no tension, just this gentle attentiveness. When I placed the mug in front of him, he looked up and smiled again, this time slower, a little more sure of himself. "Happy birthday, by the way." And there it was. Finally, the words I'd been aching to hear all day, spoken not out of obligation, but with sincerity. "Thank you," I whispered, voice thinner than I meant it to be. He looked at me for a moment, really looked. And in his eyes, I didn't see pity. I saw something softer. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. The cupcake sat between us, untouched for now. But it didn't matter. The gesture had already done its work. The silence was broken. The loneliness, for the first time all day, took a step back. We sat at the kitchen table like two people who weren't supposed to be there, yet somehow were exactly where they needed to be. The rain outside continued its gentle rhythm, a kind of hush falling over everything. Daniel cradled his coffee cup between his hands, occasionally blowing across the surface before taking small sips. I sat across from him, fingers loosely curled around my own mug, the ceramic warm against skin that had felt cold all day. I don't remember how the conversation shifted. One moment we were laughing, genuinely laughing about how he once tried to bake cookies for his mom and ended up setting off their fire alarm. And then, like fog creeping in, something changed in my voice. A drop in tone. A pause that lingered too long, he noticed. He didn't speak right away. He just leaned forward, elbows on the table, his expression softening. Can I ask something? He said quietly. I nodded. Where is he? I mean, your husband? The words hit like a pebble tossed into still water. Not an accusation, not prying, just honest curiosity, a gentle question. And for some reason, I didn't deflect. I didn't laugh it off or change the subject. I just looked down at the steam rising from my coffee and let the truth slip out like breath. He left. This morning before I woke up, I said. No note, no call, not even a text, just gone. Daniel didn't answer right away. He nodded, slow, like he was letting it settle in. I added, he forgets a lot of things lately. Or maybe he just doesn't care to remember. There was a long silence, the kind that only exists when someone's really listening. I kept going. You know the worst part? I said. It's not even the forgetting. It's that I don't expect anything anymore. I didn't make plans, didn't hope for a surprise. I already knew today would be empty. He looked at me with those deep, still young eyes, uncomplicated, but not naive. Eyes that weren't clouded by years of disappointment. That's not how it's supposed to be, he said. The words were simple, but they landed hard. My throat tightened. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to blink back the burn building behind my eyes. I used to think it was just a rough patch. People go through them, right? Life gets busy, work gets stressful, the spark dims. All that stuff they talk about in movies. He didn't interrupt, but now, I whispered, I don't even feel like I'm in the same story as him. Like I'm a background character in his life. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, his lips parting as if to speak, but he hesitated. Instead, he reached across the table and rested his hand lightly on mine, just enough to be felt, not possessive, not dramatic, just human. My body flinched almost instinctively, not out of fear, but surprise. That simple contact, skin on skin, felt unfamiliar. It reminded me how long it had been since someone touched me with intention. Not a rushed kiss, not a distracted pat, just presence. I didn't pull away. You're not invisible, he said, his voice low. And you shouldn't feel like you are. I stared at our hands, his thumb resting lightly over my knuckles, the quiet thump of my own pulse under the skin. It felt strange to be seen so clearly by someone so unexpected. A young man who had once asked me for lemonade on hot summer days now looking at me like I was more than just someone else's wife. Tears slipped down my cheeks without warning. I didn't sob, didn't break down. They just came quietly, as if they'd been waiting for permission. He squeezed my hand just slightly. It's okay, he said. You don't have to say anything. But I did. I don't remember the last time someone asked me how I was without expecting me to say fine. I don't even know what I'd say anymore if I told the truth. Daniel didn't let go. He didn't retreat. He just stayed, anchored, and in that dim, rainy kitchen, with the scent of coffee and frosting still lingering in the air, I let myself exhale. Not just from my lungs, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere tired. It wasn't about age, or timing, or even attraction. It was about being seen. And in that moment, Daniel saw me. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, its pattering rhythm softening against the window panes. The house felt warmer somehow, not from the thermostat, but from the quiet, steady presence sitting across from me. Daniel hadn't moved his hand from mine, and I hadn't moved to take mine away. It was such a small thing, his fingers resting lightly over mine, but it held a weight I hadn't expected, a kind of comfort that felt unfamiliar and new, and maybe a little dangerous. He looked at me like I mattered. Not in the way someone gives you polite attention, but in the way someone sees through the armor you didn't even realize you'd been wearing. Can I tell you something weird? He asked suddenly, his voice just above a whisper. I nodded, unsure what else I could do. My voice didn't feel ready to speak again. I used to think you were unreachable, he said. Like, when I was younger, you were always this really calm, graceful person. Even when you just waved from the garden or brought out lemonade, you always seemed peaceful, kind of untouchable. That surprised me. A hollow laugh escaped my lips, unplanned. Peaceful? I've been anything but peaceful for years, he smiled gently. I didn't know that then. I just remember thinking you had this softness about you, and I liked being around that. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't a kid anymore. His jaw had sharp edges now, and the kind of steady gaze that didn't flinch from truth. There was sincerity in him, a deep empathy that didn't ask for anything in return. I suddenly felt aware of the moment, aware of how quiet the house had become, how the outside world was muffled by weather and walls, leaving just the two of us in the space that now felt impossibly intimate. Not in a physical way, not yet, but emotionally, something was shifting. An invisible thread pulling taut between us. You probably shouldn't say things like that to a woman on her birthday, I said, smiling faintly, trying to ease the tension. Especially not when she's feeling fragile, but it's true, he replied, and there was no smile in his voice now, just quiet certainty. You're still that soft, that calm. I see it even now. A breath caught in my chest. My fingers twitched slightly beneath his, and only then did he withdraw his hand, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid even that small separation might unravel something. And maybe it would have, if the distance hadn't been replaced by a different kind of closeness. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the blurred world beyond the glass. The outline of his reflection hovered in the darkened pane, merging with the rain-streaked trees outside. I used to wonder what it would be like to talk to you like this, he said softly, not turning around. Not as a neighbor, not as a kid, just as two people. Something in my chest tightened again, not from discomfort, but recognition. That strange, weightless feeling that comes when someone says the thing you've never admitted out loud, even to yourself. I stood, too, not really sure why, and joined him at the window. We stood side by side, the quiet between us pulsing with meaning. Not heavy, not awkward, just full. The rain slowed even more, down to a soft mist, barely noticeable. The trees glistened under the porch light, every leaf holding a drop of silver. The kind of quiet only rain can bring. You know, I said, you being here. It's the only thing that's felt real today. He turned to look at me, eyes soft, voice barely a murmur. You feel real to me. There was no movement, no dramatic gesture, just his eyes holding mine for a long, charged second. And in that space between us filled with everything said and unsaid, I felt something flicker. Not just attraction. It was something deeper, a knowing, a warmth, a longing to be known, and finally being seen. The air between us felt thick with things neither of us dared to reach for, yet neither of us stepped away. No lines were crossed, but we had wandered dangerously close to them, and neither of us said a word to stop it. The room had settled into a thick quiet, the kind that doesn't ask for words but wraps around you like a warm blanket. The rain had stopped completely now, and the outside world seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the only sounds were the occasional creak of the house settling and the soft tick of the clock on the wall, each second marking the time we were stealing, time that didn't belong to either of us, but felt like ours anyway. Daniel and I still stood by the window, side by side, close enough to feel the subtle warmth of each other without touching. That kind of closeness, wordless, restrained, can be more powerful than anything else. It fills the space with tension, but not the kind that begs to be resolved. The kind that simply exists, thick and alive, begging to be noticed but not broken. He shifted slightly, his shoulder nearly brushing mine, and I found myself catching a breath I didn't even know I was holding. I should probably head home soon, he said finally, his voice soft and reluctant, like someone waking from a dream. They don't want to leave, I nodded slowly, not because I wanted him to go, but because I knew he was right. Reality didn't knock, it simply crept in, inch by inch. reminding you that quiet moments have to end. That borrowed time always runs out. Thank you for the cupcake, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, and for staying. I didn't know how badly I needed company. He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine. I'm glad I came. There was so much beneath those words, so much in the way he said them. He wasn't just glad he'd brought a cupcake. He was glad he'd stepped into my world, even if just for a little while. I saw it in his eyes, the way they lingered on mine, the way his gaze softened when it dropped to my mouth and quickly flicked back up like he was catching himself, and I felt something stir in me too, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. It wasn't about romance or desire. It was about presence, about being seen, heard, felt. My husband had long stopped giving me that kind of attention, the kind that feels like light through a window you'd forgotten was there. Daniel ran a hand through his damp hair and stepped back, creating a small distance between us that felt much larger than it was. I don't want to make anything weird, he said, his voice careful now. I hope today wasn't too hard. I wanted to answer, but instead I walked to the kitchen island, opened the cupcake box again, and gently pulled out the single cupcake he'd brought. The frosting had smudged a little along one edge, but the message still sat proudly on top in edible gold. Happy birthday. I turned toward him, holding the cupcake like a fragile thing. Would you share it with me? He smiled, and something in that smile told me he understood. It wasn't about sugar or celebration. It was about not wanting to finish something alone. We sat again at the table, the air a little heavier now, a little slower. I grabbed 2 forks from the drawer and passed him one. He waited until I took the first bite before he followed. We didn't speak much, just sat there, passing small glances between mouthfuls of chocolate and silence. I watched him as he wiped a smudge of frosting from the corner of his lip, then looked up, catching me watching. For a second, everything paused, not in fear, not in guilt, just in acknowledgement. Something had shifted between us today, but we didn't have to define it. We both knew what it was, and we both knew what it wasn't. When he finally stood to leave, the moment stretched. He lingered by the door, his hand on the knob, his gaze uncertain. I'm just next door, he said, almost like a promise. If you ever want to talk, or just not be alone. I gave a small nod. That means more than you know. As he opened the door, the air from outside swept in, cool and damp with the scent of wet earth and leaves. He stepped out into the fading light, the sky painted with soft streaks of lavender and gold. I watched him walk back toward his house, shoulders relaxed, hands in his pockets. He never looked back, but I stood at the door long after it closed, the warmth of his presence still lingering in the air, and something unspoken gently blooming in the quiet he left behind.